Imagine watching your government commit one atrocity after another: the massacre of the Prophet's grandson, the sacking of the holy city of Medina, the siege of Mecca itself, and yet you still support them. Why would an entire province do that? That is exactly what Syria did for the Umayyad Caliphate. And the answer is far more fascinating than you might think. Hey everyone, I am Ali, and today we are talking about one of the most interesting stories in early Islamic history: the unwavering support of Syria for the Umayyad dynasty. Let's start with some context. The Umayyad Caliphate was the first hereditary Islamic dynasty. Its capital was Damascus, right in the heart of Syria. From the very beginning, Syria was different from every other province. Iraq was volatile, Egypt was restless. The Hijaz, the region containing Mecca and Medina, was deeply critical of Umayyad rule. But Syria was rock solid. During the first civil war, known as First Fitna, Syria firmly backed Muawiya ibn Abi Sufyan against Ali ibn Abi Talib. That support helped Muawiya win. It helped him move the capital to Damascus. It helped him transform the caliphate into a centralized empire. Syria was not just a province, it was the engine of the entire dynasty. But here is where it gets complicated. The Umayyads did some genuinely horrifying things. They killed Hussein ibn Ali, the grandson of the Prophet, at Karbala. The Muslim world was shaken to its core. They sent an army to Medina and unleashed violence on the city in what became known as the Battle of Harra. They laid siege to Mecca, the holiest site in Islam. These were not small controversies. In Iraq, in the Hijaz, in many corners of the empire, people rose up in outrage. But Syria did not. Why? The answer starts with one man, Muawiya ibn Abi Sufyan. Before becoming caliph, Muawiya governed Syria for 20 years. This is a long time, and he used every single year very wisely. He had a political philosophy, what Arabs called hilm. It means a combination of patience, leniency, and diplomatic skill. He did not rule Syria through fear, he ruled it through relationships. He married into powerful Arab tribes of the region, especially the Banu Kalb. He gave them senior positions in the military and the government. By the time the civil wars began, those tribes had a personal stake in Umayyad survival. Their power, their prestige, their futures, all of it was tied to the dynasty. For them, the Umayyads were not just rulers, they were family. Now let's talk about something even more concrete: money. Syria was the imperial heartland. That meant tax revenue from across the entire empire flowed directly into it. The Syrian army, known as the Jund, was a professional standing force. They were paid in cash, they were paid on time. In the 7th century, that was a genuinely extraordinary. Damascus was transformed from a provincial city into the capital of an global empire. Trade boomed, infrastructure was built, the standard of living rose. To an ordinary Syrian, life under the Umayyads was good, stable, and prosperous. Now compare that to what the opposition was offering. The rebels in Iraq and the Hijaz promised religious purity and justice, but they also represented chaos. They represented civil war. They represented the end of the order that Syria had come to depend on. When you are comfortable, instability feels like the real enemy. There is another layer to this that people often overlook. Syria sat directly on the border with the Byzantine Empire. The threat of invasion was constant and real. This shaped the Syrian character in a unique way. The Jund was not just a tax funded army, it was a force forged through continuous frontier warfare. They had discipline, they had cohesion. The Umayyads cleverly used this. They positioned Syria as the shield of the entire Islamic world. the only thing standing between the civilization and Byzantine conquest. That narrative worked. It gave Syrian soldier a sense of identity and purpose that went beyond tribal politics. To him, the rebel movements in Mecca or Kufa were not holy causes. They were distractions. They were threats to the defense of the empire. So he stayed loyal, not out of religious conviction, but out of duty to the order he was defending. But was this loyalty morally defensible? Many Muslims at the time said no. And honestly, from a religious standpoint, the criticism is hard to argue with. The Umayyads had crossed very clear lines. But the Syrians were not operating from a religious framework in that moment. They were operating from a practical one. They saw Karbala tragedy through a different lens. To many in Syria, it was a political conflict, not a straightforward case of tyranny against righteousness. Umayyad propaganda shaped how those events were understood. And at the end of the day, they made a calculation: stability over ideology, security over purity. That is a very human calculation. People have been making it throughout the history. So, what is the lesson here? Human beings are practical. Economic incentives and political stability are powerful forces. Sometimes they are even more powerful than moral clarity. Syria did not love Umayyads because they believed they were righteous. Syria supported the Umayyads because the Umayyads had spent decades making Syria's prosperity inseparable from their own survival. That is a masterclass in political consolidation, and it is also a warning. When a regime ties your livelihood to its existence, it does not need to be a just and morally upright regime.